Hello and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. Amazing to see people coming in now. Let's just give everyone a couple of minutes before we get started. And if you'd like to pop in the chat where you're dialing in from, always fun to see where people are in the world. Okay, so today we're going to have a very exciting panel discussion with 4 incredible global employee experience leaders who you can see on the screen with you today. So we can all orient ourselves. If you haven't already had a chance to read the EX Manifesto, feel free to check it out at exmanifesto.com. I'll pop that link in the chat now. Hopefully it's going to get lost amongst all of the intros as to where people are coming from.
And so we know what we're all talking about this morning. I just want to take a moment to break down what the EX Manifesto is, the purpose and how it is structured. So the EX Manifesto is a document to guide leaders and organizations on what employee experience is and how to go about thinking about employee experience in their organizations. The purpose of the manifesto is to be a bit of a kind of flag in the sand or a North Star for organizations around the world to aim for. It's a shared understanding of what valuing employee experience in our organizations can look like. And what we've done is we've structured the manifesto to set out the definitions, particularly how EX relates to culture, and the 3 core values, and then 7 EX design principles, which will shape your design process.
And since the EX Manifesto went live, we have had leaders in 16 countries, hopefully counting, already become signatories. And today we have 4 of the contributors with us to share some of their experience and the difference that they think EX can make in the world. So without further ado, I'd love to invite each of our amazing panelists to introduce themselves, give a bit of a background on their career, and importantly, why they were excited to contribute to this global project. So I'll go first to Sam, please.
Thanks, Phoebe. So my name's Samantha Gadd. I am the founder and co-CEO of Excellent. Excellent is the home of EX Design School, which is an online learning platform and community supporting leaders and organizations to learn how to co-create employee experiences in their organizations. I've spent my entire career believing in the power of employee experience. So from really early on in my early HR career, then to training as a life coach and executive coach, and then the last 10 years growing New Zealand's largest HR and EX consultancy. Recently launching Excellent to support leaders and organizations around the world to co-design EX with their people. It feels like my whole career has led me here. And I'm also the proud mum of 3 beautiful boys who are 14, 12, and 9. And that's the other really important part of my life. So thanks so much, Phoebe, for hosting us today.
Fantastic. Mark, over to you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I've had a long career, probably 25 years or so in human resources, most of it feeling like an imposter. And it really wasn't until I got to Airbnb and the founders there said they didn't know what HR was, but everything they'd heard about it, they didn't really like. Could we do something different? And so that is really where employee experience, I think, had its first birth. And we had a really fun and exciting time in kind of reinventing the way in which we work with employees, and employees work with each other, with customers, and with the communities in which they operate. And so I'm super excited to be part of this. When Sam got in touch with me with all of her energy and excitement and passion, I was thrilled to hear that someone was going to take the lead in trying to clarify for everyone what is employee experience, because it's really been somewhat bastardized in the way HR leaders are using it, in the way consultancies are using it, and this notion of providing a really clear, consistent, and easy to use and apply to how it fits in your organization approach is super exciting for me.
Thanks, Mark. And Dean, over to you in sunny California.
Thanks, Phoebe. I'm looking at a very beautiful blue sky today, actually, right? No, my name's Dean Carter, and I've been leading HR for a variety of different companies for over 20 years. And I got into HR longer than that, and it took me, but I remember looking around the room at some point and going, wow, this profession needs a lot of work. And there's huge opportunity to make change in this. And I feel like everywhere I've been, tried to find, new and disruptive ways of really thinking about the work that we're doing, always pointed at kind of the employee experience and how do we focus on that. And I guess, we have lots of tools that we've had over the years. And I think that every time I get one that works, I try to break it and figure out how to do something a little bit better. And I've had 7 years of leading HR for Patagonia, which is a highly disruptive activist company. And I feel like my role as an activist leader in people and culture is part of this experience. So of course, when a high energy New Zealander calls me and says, let's blow up employee experience, I'm like, I am so in. So we met at Balthazar in New York for the first time, and I was just blown away. And I'm so excited about this opportunity to, again, just another thing in this incredible profession to rethink and reinvent and really kind of, in some ways, get back to our roots and really just focusing us on the nature of being humans and being human at once. And we'll talk about that. Thank you. Oh, Sam, thank you so much for bringing this together.
Absolutely. And Jacob, what about on your side?
Yeah, first I'll just say I'm super honored and humbled to be here. I was telling everyone earlier, Patagonia is probably my favorite company in the world. They've done so much for me in terms of, informing my view on sustainability. Just so many wonderful experiences. And Mark, same thing on the Airbnb side. All of my wonderful family memories are somehow, some way connected through Airbnb. So yeah, I'm an honor to be here. A quick bit about myself. I'll start on the personal side. Same thing. I've got 3 kids, all under 10. Family is just incredibly important to me. I'm from El Paso, Texas, kind of first generation college. So yeah, just really, really thankful to be here. The professional side, I'm a little bit of an outlier. I haven't been working in HR for a long time. Probably I've been in the workforce for 20 plus years. Most of that has been leading product and design teams in technology, music industry, and mostly in the music industry as well as the ed tech industry. But, I think why I wanted, when Sam reached out to me, why I wanted to be here, and I'll probably touch on this throughout our conversation, but in the product development world, there is something called the Agile Manifesto. And it is this core set of principles about how do you take software and development and deliver value. And that has had such an impactful part of my career that when I heard about this, I just knew I had to jump on it. My connection, just so you don't think I'm completely off base here and like just showed up to be rogue, is that I recently started a company. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called JobSage. Really quickly, our mission is just to bring more transparency to the recruiting experience so that job seekers can truly understand what it's like to work at a place versus trying to figure out which companies maybe say they are, but it's quite not true. And we work really proactively with companies to make sure that job seekers get the best of information. So again, really excited, really humbled to be here. And Samantha, you're an awesome human. Thanks for bringing us together.
Amen to that. I just realized I didn't introduce myself, but I'm not an EX expert, but I am an investor from Blackbird Ventures, which is an Australia and New Zealand focused venture capital firm that invests in wild hearts with the wildest of ambitions right at the beginning. And Sam Gadd is one such wild heart. So Sam, we're all here because of you. Tell us about your idea to create the EX Manifesto. Why was it important to you?
Yeah, great question. So employee experience is not well understood globally. And over the last 7 years, it was interesting, actually. It's really cool for me having Mark on this call, because about 7 years ago, I listened to a podcast where Mark was talking about employee experience at Airbnb, and it was like a light bulb for me. It was actually a real turning point in my career. It really sort of inspired me to change the brand of my company from HR shop to humankind, and really start to explore what employee experience is and how to design better employee experiences, both within humankind and also for our clients. So to kind of be full circle and now on a panel with Mark is just really humbling and exciting. And so when we started working in this space, we realized that no one really understood what EX is. And then it was really not just my idea, but a couple of advisors and also my co-founder, Jenny, we were kind of thinking, how do we think about employee experience? How do we help grow that understanding globally about employee experience? If we're going to build a company in this space, we need people to understand what it is. And we really were inspired, Jacob. I'm glad you brought up the Agile Manifesto, because the Agile Manifesto, 20 years ago, 17 guys got around a table and decided that project management and IT needed to be different. And much like all of us on this call, we really believe that organizations need to be thinking about their people in a different way. And so we took inspiration from that. We pulled together a really diverse group of incredible humans. And I love the fact that some people are from HR, some people are chief people officers, some people are product people within the HR space, and other people are just like future thinkers. Like we had a representative sort of from Generation Z and Generation Y. We really wanted to kind of get the full spectrum of ideas into the room. And so it was, being inspired by the movement that the Agile Manifesto created, that we decided to do the EX Manifesto in a really collaborative way. And just it's been an incredible experience pulling this together, and now seeing that leaders in over 16 countries have already co-signed. It's blowing my mind to what impact we can as a collaborative group make on the world.
I'd love to hear from everyone, having become signatories and contributed to the text of the manifesto. What are your hopes for change and the impact that the manifesto will create? Maybe I'll go to Mark first, as perhaps one of the first people to hold a title that included the words people experience. Would love to hear your hopes for the manifesto and its impact.
Sure. Well, I've always tried to lead or make choices around, personally and professionally, using my values and my heart. And I've chosen to work for big-hearted companies and wonderfully thoughtful leaders like the Haas family at Levi's or the Fishers at The Gap. And then more recently, the founders at Airbnb. And I've also affiliated myself with some organizations that are focused on being 100% at work, bringing your best self to work. And so, what I'm hoping for, and I think it's more important now than ever, having a couple of kids who are in the workforce and also doing a lot of advising and consulting, the whole notion of work, there was so much opportunity when the pandemic hit and we're coming out of it. And I'm not sure people are really making good choices, being very intentional and deliberate about it. So my hope is that we can find a way to help bring more humanity to the workplace. Dean used the word human. And in that kind of more purpose, more engagement, more productivity, more meaning, because it is something we all have to do, and it's not something we should have to endure. It should be something that we can really feel like we can contribute and we get a lot out of, and we're an important part of what's going on at the company that we've chosen to work with. So that's kind of my hope.
How about you, Jacob, as a leader of an organization?
My motivations are purely selfish. It just feels so good to work for a company where your boss or the CEO or the manager, you can tell, just truly cares about you. And when I've been at those places, it just feels amazing, because I feel like I can talk to them about anything. I can be vulnerable. It's the best feeling. I wake up and I actually want to go to work. So I want to see more companies like that. I want to see more companies, I have three kids, 3 young girls. I want to see more companies like that in the world. So if I can play any small part in that, then I'm all in. Tell me what I need to do.
Love that. Dean.
Thanks, Phoebe. We spent a lot of time thinking about ways that we can get more out of people. The performance review. How can we get them to perform more and deliver more? the engagement survey. It was like, how can we get you to give discretionary effort? And I really think about, we were so focused on what are we getting out of people, that we really haven't focused about the experience that they're having and thinking about as whole humans. And I think we pretended that it was like some episode of Severance, that work and life were these incredibly separate things. And one of the things I learned at Patagonia is when you see a mom holding her baby at work at table, and you can realize that this is a human being, or in the parking lot when there's a meltdown, I know exactly what her day is going to be like. Or a new dad who's nursing, a new lawyer sitting at a table nursing. And you see, these are real human beings. And I think it's time for us to realize that we can't just sever work and life, and that people need to be able to bring their full humanness to work. And that's what I think this conversation is about, is really delivering an experience that recognizes me as a full human, not just someone that is there to produce something. And which is why I work for purpose-driven companies and who have some level of meaning. There's a short life. I'm not gonna leave this place without, kicking some butt and making a difference.
Amen to that. And Sam?
I love that, Dean. My hope is that every employee around the world has the opportunity to contribute to the design of their own employee experience. So it's that feeling of agency. I've craved that for my entire career, and I've kind of managed to create that through being in business. But I really believe that every employee should have that opportunity. And my whole purpose from the very early part of my career is to help people to love what they do, much like you, Jacob. When you have an experience where you've got an amazing leader and you're in an organization that you believe is making a difference, it changes your whole life. And so for me, the work experience not only enables higher performance of organizations, which of course is a wonderful outcome for leaders and organizations, but it actually changes our lives. We go back to our families as happier humans, as happier parents, as happier contributors in our communities. And I think work can have a much broader impact than just in organizations. So that's my hopes for this manifesto, and that it really sparks something around the world.
So the manifesto has 3 core values and 7 principles. Quick fire round. What is, in your mind, the most impactful value or principle in the EX Manifesto? What kind of really resonates with each of you? I'll go back to Sam first.
Yeah, the one that's resonating, I mean, all of it, I love it. We've agonized over every word, but the one that's resonating for me at the moment is unlocking talent over fighting for talent. And the reason being is that I just honestly have heard organizations for like my whole career talking about this tiny pool of top talent. And the reality is that I've seen, everyone can be an incredible performer if they're given the right environment, tools, experience to do so. And so it's really about getting rid of this notion that there's only a small amount of people that are going to really enable our organization to succeed, and believing that there's potential and everyone genuinely wants to come to work to do an amazing job. So yeah, that's my favorite part at the moment.
So you don't love all of them, Sam? I thought that's what you were going to say.
Yeah, I do.
Jacob, you've selected yourself to go next.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. I was going to go people first because I think maybe that's ultimately, but I'm going to go with instilling ownership, not just in HR and across the org. So, I mentioned earlier that, the Agile Manifesto was a big part of my life. And yeah, in the Agile Manifesto, there's, different types of processes you can follow, and there are different roles and different responsibilities for different roles. But ultimately, I think when that manifesto clicked for me, it was when I realized that yes, all these things exist, but you have to remember at the end of the day, like, it's about the team, and the team decides, and the team feels accountability, and the team feels ownership. And when you actually get to that point, then the tough conversations become easier. All the other things that you read in the manifesto become easier, right? And there is no right or wrong way to do any of this. But I hope at the end of the day that, yeah, my favorite one is like everybody should feel responsible. And if we feel like we're part of a team, then that's when good things happen.
That's so powerful, isn't it? The idea that everyone's involved, everyone has agency and is doing the thing rather than having it done to them. It's such a subtle shift, but really important. Dean, what's resonating with you at the moment?
Jake, I love that everyone's responsible. Like, we have responsibility and accountability. Mine, I've kind of, there's several, it's really difficult to choose, but I'm going to go back to work is enriching versus work is destructive. And, my own personal motto is leave things better than you find them. And I think that as a result of work, people should have better relationships with their spouse, more time with their children, and the ability to get outside. You should have the ability to eat healthy and live kind of prosper in both physically, mentally, financially, spiritually. And if that's not happening, you're spending most of your waking hours in this place, then we're not doing the work that we need to be doing. And I just think every single day we need to wake up and make sure that we're seeing kind of whole people and putting into them more than we're extracting. And we're creating, and not just like, that's not a motto. We have to really think about the systems that we're putting in place, and that the systems are regenerative in nature, that that the tools and the research things that we're doing and what we measure, are we actually measuring how much we put into people's life? And we ask them the question, as a result of working with this company, did we put more into their life than we took out? That simple question is the fundamental question of the agreement that we've had with work. And I think it should change.
And Mark.
Yeah, amen. So the kind of the headline, as I look back on the work we did at Airbnb, what EX is this notion of doing things with and for your employees, not to them. And so I guess if I had to choose a favorite, mine would be the second principle, which is to take a human-centered approach that encourages reciprocal trust and understanding, not traditional top-down management practices. And it's interesting because we democratized our culture, and we basically had everyone involved in being a brand ambassador and a cultural advocate at Airbnb. And so everyone was part of this, and we were both curators, but we were also monitors. So we took it upon ourselves to make sure that things were going according to plan, that the mission and values were coming to life. And if not, we cheer people on, but we also told people if we thought they were out of line. And so the two-way dialogue and of asking a lot of questions, and the idea of having the employees help you to prioritize what's most important and then design the solutions, that to me was a key shift in the way HR EX was working, because it seems like a lot of HR leaders felt like they clawed their way to get to a seat at the table. And then when they got there, they wanted to be the powerful almighty and have all the answers. And that's just not the way it works. And the pandemic taught us that for sure, you got to find out what's going on and you got to get people involved. So that's kind of my favorite one of all of them.
Yeah, completely. And Mark, I guess, like, as I think about the group that we've got assembled here, and also the people who've joined us today for the webinar, I think in a sense we're preaching to the converted here about the importance of employee experience. How, Mark, when you're talking to leaders of businesses that maybe haven't come across employee experience before, haven't implemented it in their organizations, how do you, what do you talk to them about in terms of why EX matters, maybe from a business perspective, as well as because it feels right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say the most important thing that I think we learned was that if you treat your employees the way you want them to treat your customers, for us, it was our hosts, because they were the ones who were delivering to the guests. It just makes a whole heck of a lot more sense for both setting the right example, modeling the right behaviors, and delivering on what your company goals and outcomes are. And so, for us, our mission at Airbnb was to create a world where anyone can belong anywhere. And we were privileged to have that as why we got up in the morning every day and what we were trying to deliver around the world. And so in employee experience, we then said, okay, if that's what we're trying to do externally, then what we should be doing internally is helping people understand what is belonging and how do we create belonging and how do we do that with our employees so that they can then figure out how to help our hosts understand how to deliver belonging in their homes. And so, I would say this notion of starting with what it is you're in business doing and what are your authentic values and how do you want to show up in the world, and then working backwards to then figure out, so what does that mean, how we show up as leaders, as employees, as coworkers, as citizens. That's kind of, I think, the most important starting place. And also, I guess I would say understanding that employee experience is not an HR thing, it's not an EX thing, it is a company-wide thing. And it is all about your mindset and how you're thinking about how you're bringing people in and how you're setting them up for success and how you're treating them each day and how they're treating each other and all of that. So this notion that it's like a HR led thing is totally off. And so that, I guess those would be my words of wisdom.
Mm.
I love that,
Sam,
Mark. Yeah. Can I jump in for just a second, Phoebe, on that?
I'll
I
allow
just
it,
love
yeah.
that. Yeah. I just love the idea that everyone's responsible for this. And I don't think that like, what's our new HR program that we need to launch? And it's like, as a CEO and a leader, what program are you going to launch in terms of creating an amazing employee experience? And this conversation around how when you put an employee first, it leads to better customer experiences and better profits isn't a new one. If you want to read a really great article on this, in 1998, an article was written by Harvard Business Review with about Sears and Roebuck, and they did massive data analysis on this. And there's an absolute direct connection between treat employees amazing, you get great customer service, and it leads to profit. And if you want to just see even a database thing, go back to 1998. And anyhow, there were other decisions Sears made after that. But this article written by Tony Rucci, Stephen Kern, and Richard Quinn, I highly recommend that you take a look at it, because it really is a financial business reason written by HBR in 1998 around this. And we're kind of coming back full circle and going, wow, we really need to focus. After years in the 90s focusing on profit, we've coming back to this idea of, wow, what if we focus on employee first?
Completely.
Yep.
Yeah, Sears probably didn't have an average tenure of 1 year employee retention back in the day. I don't know about now.
Yeah, in that moment, they hit big. Every single metric that they were measuring got better as a result of that, on the employee side, on the customer side, and on the profit side. It's a really, if you want to go back to your CEO, like, read this and the manifesto.
Hey, Dean, I've got a question for you. Why? That article was amazing. Why has nothing happened since then? Like, what stopped or what happened from that incredible piece of work? I think it's called the service profit chain, or the profit service chain. Yeah.
You know what? I think the world got distracted. Like, I think we, think about what was going on in the 90s. We're celebrating heroes like Jack Welch, who is, again, like, how do you, get rid of the bottom 20%, raise the top 20%? Everyone's focused on kind of how much you could extract from people and companies. I think we've kind of gotten to a point, and Mark, you pointed out, and Sam, and also Jake, like, we just went through 2 years of COVID. We lost loved ones, moments you couldn't even go to funerals or mourn or see someone's new baby or even do weddings. And you're like, what, man, this is a short life. And if we don't focus on the experience of human beings next to us, or that we're responsible for, then, man, what are we here for? And COVID, I think, was a big just kick in the stomach, Sam. Like, we need to rethink this. The whole deal that we are setting forward is got to change. Yeah.
I read a quote recently that I think captures this well. It goes something like, when the measure becomes the goal, it ceases to become a good measure. So yes, like putting employee first, all those things ultimately lead to profit, right? But if at some point you just make profit the measure, like, it's not a good measure of anything anymore, right? So anyways,
Yvon Chouinard says, if you do the right thing, that always leads to profit. And I can tell you, we made several difficult decisions, and every time we did the right thing, we did well.
Yeah.
Well, and a topic probably for a different panel interview discussion would be on how people are handling this notion of creating connections and belonging in the workplace, because I think a lot of people aren't using an employee experience lens to have the appropriate discussions to come up with the right priorities and solutions to address how all of this can be more intentionally, thoughtfully designed so that people are enjoying, appreciating, understanding, communicating, collaborating in a meaningful way. I think people got very lazy, and I think people are also afraid to have the hard conversations. But I don't distract from today's topic.
Totally. I mean, I don't know, Dan, if you can enlighten us with any of the examples of times you made hard decisions where it would have been easy to go one way, but thinking about, purpose before profit or purpose leads to profit, you made them in another way. Anyway, I would love just to hear about the 7 years you've spent at Patagonia heading up this work and what others can take from it to their own companies.
I'll talk about a great example with Patagonia. There was a time when things weren't so good. Business was a big challenge, and Levon would say we've made a lot of big mistakes in that moment running the business, and we almost lost it. They made a bunch of changes, but what they never changed was childcare. It wasn't something that they cut. They continued to have teachers and let people bring their children to work. What that meant is people stayed. And they remember that moment when you still, even the toughest times, kept things in the company that were deep in their values. And and that's just a great example where even though times were tough, that did not change and they didn't make a difference. And I think that's kind of, it's a value when things are tough and you still do it. That's a value. Otherwise, it's just a motto. And when you see someone make a decision that is the right thing, and it's just, we get asked all the time, what's the ROI on childcare? I'm like, what's the ROI on your parking lot? Like, why are you asking me that question? Like, I don't even know. It's such a ridiculous concept. Like, no, why did you do an ROI on your parking lot? And then you tell me that, then I'll tell you what the ROI is on childcare. You need a parking lot, and people need to bring their children to work. That's like, anyhow, I just think, awesome. I guess what things, that's even what do you value? You value what you do an ROI on. Like, if you value, probably don't need an ROI.
Totally. To a certain extent, measure what matters, right? But not everything that matters is measurable. Sam, what about you've worked with a lot of companies over the years in your humankind capacity. When you kind of enter a new organization and talk about the importance of EX, what are some of the first things that companies tend to be able to do to kind of take a step on the journey towards delivering employee experience rather than, HR?
Yeah, great question. The first thing that any organization can do is to start truly listening to employees, like really understanding and caring what their employees think. And employees actually know what they need and want to be really successful in an organization. They're the best people to kind of tell you what experiences are going to help them to thrive. And I truly believe that employees come to work wanting to perform and do a great job. And if they're not performing in the first place, I look as kind of in the mirror as a leader. And so at Humankind, when we go into these organizations and we're trying to help organizations think about how they can take a more employee-centered or employee experience approach, the first place to start is to deeply listen to their people and trust that when they ask their people what they need and want, that employees actually won't be unreasonable. Generally, employees will ask for things that are absolutely well within reasonable limits of what will be doable by the organization. And then the second thing with that is that supporting leaders in organizations to know that they don't have to have all the answers themselves. And I feel like, we're in a really tough time right now, economically. Like, all of the big trends out there are scary for organizations and leaders. And I don't think there's ever been a harder time to be a leader in an organization than it is today. And a lot of leaders and organizations, and I know myself in the past too, you lie up at night really thinking about the challenges you have in your organization and stressing about how you're going to solve for them. And the reality is you don't have to solve all those problems alone. You've got a whole bunch of people in your organization that are willing to help, have great answers. And as long as you can kind of be vulnerable enough to say that you don't have the answers and be open enough to ask the questions and genuinely listen, you're going to be in a far better position. So that's the sort of stuff that we would encourage organizations to do when we work with them through Humankind.
I think that that question of how EX looks in the next couple of years, where there are challenging macro conditions, a lot more uncertainty, kind of a changing of the game, but this definitely not getting any easier post-pandemic. Would love just to hear any thoughts from around the room about how to think about EX in this moment.
I can jump in on that. I think when you think about employee experience, there's three things that a lot of people are talking about in the moment. The first one is to actually want a purpose. I think that's kind of an employee experience, and what is their personal purpose, and you can help them find that, or they can attach to a company that has a deep purpose. But I think the employee experience, people act for purpose. The second thing is in the experience, like help. What is my path? Like, someone helped me. There's so many things going on. Career is so confusing, and I want to be proud and go home to my family that I have the ability to learn and grow, and the opportunity, just like everyone else has, to do this. And so I think they're looking for a really clear path in the company to help them with that, because it's really confusing and to get through all the ways and navigate companies. And the third thing, I think there's a really simple thing they're asking about this experience, and that's kind of a basic question, like, help me prosper. And that means mentally, physically, spiritually, like that. I think these three questions: I want a purpose, I want a path, and I want you to help me to prosper. And I didn't use the word pay really specifically. I just want to prosper in life. And I think that's a really broader context than saying I want more pay. I think people are really telling us, I just want to prosper. I want my family to prosper. I want to live a full life, and I want to go outside, and I want to have a great relationship with my spouse as a result of work. Anyway, I just think these three things at this moment people are really seeking is, purpose, path, and just to prosper.
Yeah, I can echo that. So we've done two big studies now, like 3,000 plus people surveyed. And then we've looked at a ton of research, Harvard, McKinsey, and regardless of demographics, it's exactly what Dean said. Like, the top three, like, number one was growth, show me my path, right? Help me understand my path. Number two was purpose. Like, I gotta care about my work. And then the third one was like, I want to be part of a welcoming environment, right? I want an inclusive environment where everybody can, like, that would, any way you slice the data, any demographic breakdown, those were the top three things.
It's interesting because I think what it takes to deliver that, I think you all are spot on, is people looking for there to be truth and honesty and transparency in the way the company's communicating. I remember when we kind of launched this idea at Airbnb, and we were at a all hands meeting on a Friday afternoon, and Brian threw this out to everyone, and people were very vocal there, and there was great dialogue, and conflict wasn't necessarily avoided. And so he asked, what do you think about that? And how do you kind of interpret that? And I remember someone saying, well, what does that mean? Like, does that mean you're going to tell us everything that you and Joe and Nate are talking about? Like, how transparent are you going to be? And that's what we're looking for. If we're all in, you got to be honest with us, and you got to share stuff. And I remember Brian saying, well, I am committed to sharing with you, anything that is not, personal or confidential or inappropriate based on the fact of we're an enterprise and a company. And we ended up, after that conversation, doing a lot more pulse surveys. We did a lot more Ask Me Anything events. And one of the things we did was after every e-staff meeting, I took the notes from the e-staff meeting and I boiled them down so that people heard every week, what are the things we were talking about and what decisions did we make and why did we make those at the appropriate time. And it was incredible, because if I was a day late on getting those out, people were like, where is it? This is what's helping me to know what's going on under the hood, and that, I can join in a conversation when I need to, and it's not going to be too late. And so I think, that's the three things you both identified, I think, are spot on. And then what enables that is this notion of transparency and authenticity and direct and honest two-way dialogue.
Yeah, I'd love to add something there as well. So on that transparency kind of thread, and given the current environment that we're in, I think that leaders need to not worry so much about sharing some of the challenges that they're facing in this environment with their people, because employees want an organization to thrive and succeed. And often just by leaders kind of being really transparent and vulnerable about like what's happening out there in the market, what their challenges are in terms of where they're needing to prioritize effort and time, and making the number one thing. If that's like, we've just got to double down and focus on revenue. We've got to really focus on making this part of the business survive and thrive. If you share that with employees, it's really amazing to see how people will rally around that, and they want to perform individually. They want the team to perform and the organization to perform. And all of a sudden you've got a whole bunch of really motivated people kind of helping you to thrive. Whereas if you pretend that it's all good or don't share the things that are happening, and then all of a sudden you're making drastic cuts or people don't understand the decisions you're making, that's not a great employee experience. So transparency is definitely something that employees are looking for. And I think in tough times as well as good times, that we can't just share the good news and not share the bad news, Yeah.
Transparency and authenticity are free. That's what I'm taking from this.
Yeah.
And so
Totally.
no matter what the macro conditions, you can afford to do it. What are some of the other potential speed bumps or obstacles to the EX Manifesto being adopted? And I guess that might be important to arm some of the people on this call who are kind of thinking about how to take this back to their organizations and want to be ready to face down some of those obstacles.
So I would say,
Mark.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Mark.
After I left Airbnb, I did a lot of advising and consulting and public speaking. And I would say, I think the two things that people feel fearful of were, one, what happens if I ask my employees what they want and I can't give them what they want? This concern about or the concern around creating entitlement. And I would say we're in an environment right now where certainly the employees have got a lot more power than they did before, because of the Great Resignation and the quiet, quitting and all of the things we're talking about. But I think that if you're honest and transparent and you say, just because we're asking you doesn't mean we're going to do what you say we're going to do. We all have kids, and we've talked about that. It'd be an awful way to be a parent. I mean, you'd be snowed. If you're honest up front about, we're going to ask you, we want you to be part of it, you're going to help us make decisions. We can't do everything for everyone. That's just not the way it works. And it's kind of brick in and brick out. We have limited resources and we have limited budget. But we're going to be much more intelligent about how we're going to use those funds and how we're going to involve you, and that will get us to a better place. And I'd say the other thing, people feel like it costs a lot of money to be an employee experience versus an HR function. And I don't think that's true at all, because you're going to be smarter about what you're spending your resources on, and it's going to be much more intelligent and thoughtful on what you're doing, because it's going to be what the employees say they need in order to deliver on the customer experience and the company's goals. So I'd say those are the two obstacles that I've heard most from people that I don't think are true and people should not be afraid of.
Yeah, I might add something.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, like for candidness, like my biggest fear is like it's gonna be hard, if not impossible, to measure. Like, because I feel like and Dean kind of touched on this, like the employee experience to me is not it's not a short-term outcome, it's a long-term outcome. And so, you know, the data nerd in me is like, whenever you have events and you're trying to measure the farther out that event goes out in time, like it just becomes harder and harder to correlate it to certain actions, right? So no offense if anybody's in the call who's in marketing, but like, you know, if you take your website and you make the buy button bigger or bright red, like it's very easy to say like, oh, when I made this button bigger, 20% more people clicked and revenue went up, right? But when you say like, I'm installing like parental care, right? Or I'm going to, you know, be incredibly understanding and totally empathetic to the person who just lost their child or their father, or myself. Like I had a brain tumor 3 years ago. Like you can't measure these things, right? You just at some point have to believe that this is going to create people who are loyal to your company, who see you as people, and therefore like you will reap so many benefits. And if the stick that you were trying to measure is a 3 quarterly return rate or anything like that, you're never going to be able to compete like ever against anything else. So like that is my worry, is like it is probably impossible to measure because it's such a long-term game and we live in a quarter by quarter world.
Jake, that's so true. And I think, you know, after COVID, we're kind of in it and it's starting to wane a little bit, although it's still here. I kept getting all these articles in the news. And it was really frustrating for me. It was like, well, as a result of COVID and us working at home, we're a lot more productive. Like the measurement at the end of COVID was productivity. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. Like of all the things, no one's talking about the impact on mental health and wellness. And like, they didn't talk about that. They were like, talked about productivity. They reached for the closest like piece of fruit, which was productivity. And every article in the paper focused on it. Isn't this wonderful? Because we had so much more productivity. And I just think about all the people we had more issues with mental health issues than ever before. More productive, more mental health. What's the trade-off there? So yeah, you're more productive because you work crazy hard during that time. And anyhow, I just think that, you know, to your point, Jake, like what we measure is important. At Patagon, we put in a new benefit, and we did ask the question: as a result of this benefit, did you have a better relationship with your spouse? Did you have more relationship with children? We really asked those questions, like what does it mean to put more into people's lives, and figure out your own questions for your company that matter, and maybe figure out your own manifesto. Like you take what Sam has done and this team has done, and take it home and go, okay, here's a roadmap, and what is our manifesto? What is the experience we're going to deliver? What are we going to put back into people's lives in addition to kind of what just even showing up as an extractive experience? So anyhow, that's my 2 cents is like to sell it, they have to own it. And when it's their idea, they're like, oh, I just thought of the employee manifesto. We should do that. I'm like, make it their idea.
Yeah. One other thing I would add in terms of like roadblocks for people not starting to implement this is like they feel like they need to start with a really big project or like an overhaul of employee experience across the organization or some really expensive like benefits kind of thing. And actually, you know, this kind of concept of just starting or starting with something small is really relevant here. And when I think about employee experience, you know, 5% of people's time is in one of those like key life cycle moments, which might be like onboarding or performance or remuneration or those kind of key things that, don't get me wrong, are really important. But actually the 95% of time employees are just turning up and doing their job. So what is it about the everyday experiences that they're having at work with the tools and systems and ways of working and policies or whatever that guides their everyday that we can seek their feedback on and see how we can like take a roadblock out the way or improve that in a small way just to get started. So definitely, I think people might hesitate because they might feel like it's too big and too hard and they have to start with something that's going to cost them a lot of money. And that's not what EX is. EX is about just starting small.
Completely. Okay, I'm just conscious of time. How about we go around the room and leave the audience with any final thoughts about how to get started, how to have that first conversation with other leaders, anything that you would encourage them to do to kind of take the next step with regards to this manifesto, besides signing it, which everyone should do right now. Jacob.
Okay, I can go. So I mentioned, like, at the very beginning, like, I'm a big fan of the Agile Manifesto, and that's existed for 20 years. And people are still talking about the right way to do Agile correctly. So I guess my answer to your question is, like, just get started. Realize that there is no right or wrong way. Like, there's no correct process or false process. Like, that, as long as I would do two things, like, and these are probably obvious, right? But, like, just have any kind of process and be intentional about the communication that's happening, right? And as long as you're doing that and you're continuously measuring and improving yourself, and you're just having the conversation with authenticity, like, everything will be fine. So to me, like, yeah, there's no right or wrong way. Just, you got to really do this, like, care about this deeply, and figure out what process works for you. Like, every company, I actually I never like this question, because every company, you know your company infinitely better than I do, right? And so I can't say anything, that is super meaningful, other than just get started and realize there's no right or wrong.
Dean?
Gosh, I've been thinking about this. My thought about this, as we go back and we kind of do, I think that, look at every single tool that you have. Look at the tools that we use as a profession and question every single one of them. Like, why? What is the outcome I'm looking for? Like, I really think the engagement survey needs to be reinvented. At some point it was relevant, and you had to, so engagement is like how much we can extract from you voluntarily. It's the discretionary effort survey. And I just need to take a look at your tools. Look at your performance review, look at your systems, look at all of these things and go, why are we doing this? And even the performance review, I think, is the Swiss Army knife of HR. Like, it gets comp, it does performance, it does career, it does all. And like, what is the purpose of this? Is it enriching lives? Is it doing what we want it to do? And I think we just need to go in and just look at the systems and tools. And when you break them apart, man, you just see, like, oh my God, there's so much opportunity. If you start with the outcome and then you work backwards, then you find the right systems and tool. I think we start with different outcomes, and we've kind of gotten it wrong and just like said, okay, well, that's best practice. That's what McKinsey says. That's what HBR says, or whatever. And I think we need to just think it on our own and go, what outcomes do we want in people's lives? And then design the systems around that. That's
People think you're just checking a box. It's not going to work. Like, you have to ask why, and you have to care.
Yeah. Sometimes best practice is worst practice. Do your own practice.
Yeah.
Like, just do your own practice.
Best practice is old practice.
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, I feel like as we round the corner to the end of the year, I always like to encourage companies, leaders, founders to think about how you start the following year in an inspiring way, both in sharing the company's strategies, but also in engaging your employees on how they can help make it a better place to work, how they can better connect with each other and the customer. So it could be interesting. I think a simple, easy way to get going, particularly as we head towards the beginning of the year, is, ask some simple questions. It could be done by a manager. It could be done as a function head. It could be done as a company. Of what are we doing? Should we stop doing because it's getting in the way of you being productive? What tools, what systems, what processes, and or what should we be spending our time and resources on in order to make this a better place to work, or an easier place to work, or connect better with our customers? I think when you ask those questions, you can really then shape, to Dean and Jacob's and Sam's point, what should you get rid of? What should you make better? And what should you probably initiate? And I think people will really appreciate if you ask those questions and then you listen to them, and then it turns into this idea of co-creating of what are the right priorities and what are then the way we're going to design the solutions together to get at that. And just like your iPhone, nothing should just keep going forever. You should be getting V1, V2, updates all the time. And that's the way EX should be working from now on, with the employees being the customers to how it is that work is getting done.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mark. I think if I totally agree with everything that you three have already said in terms of where to get started. And, this is a time of year where organizations are starting to think about their plans for the coming financial year, how they're going to achieve their business goals and organizational objectives. And often aligned with that is some sort of people strategy, which is okay, how are we going to build and develop the capability to deliver our organizational objectives? And if we think about that, not from what does the organization need, but from what our people need. So it's really flipping that inside out. That's a really great place to start. So I think that, the questions that the three of you have kind of already put out there in terms of what do our people need, what do they love, what do they want to get rid of, what's getting in their way, and really starting to consider our organization strategy from the inside out versus what the organization needs first. That's a great thing to think about.
I love that. Transparency, authenticity, ask open questions of your employees, listen, and then act. Super inspiring. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. And if you haven't already, we would love you to both share the EX Manifesto and of course, make sure that you co-sign in support of the coming revolution. Later today, we'll share a link to the recording of this webinar. Feel free to share that with other people who you think might be interested. And you'll also receive an invite to an event next week where Excellent will host a behind the scenes of the EX Manifesto discussion, where Sam, Tom, and Jenny on the team will dig into the details of how the project unfolded in Austin, Texas, and just the challenges of taking all the ideas around EX from about 30 incredible contributors and turning them into the document, the very clear, concise document that you see today. They'll also share some more tips about how to bring this manifesto to life in your own organization, and have time for Q&A, which I know we didn't have time for today. So thank you all so much. I just want to say a huge thank you to our amazing panelists. It was a fascinating discussion, I think. Yeah. And most of all, thank you to Sam for bringing everyone together. I hope you have a fantastic day, everyone.
Thank you, Sam.
And let's take this revolution forward together.
Thanks you, Phoebe. Thanks, panel. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.